Welcome, everyone. This is Adrian
And this is Carolyn.
here. Welcome to Managing Madness. Here for episode 3. Today we'll be going
Woohoo.
into, a little bit more on kind of adulting, some of the things we kind of touched on in episode 1. So we'll start us off already. In episode 1, we discussed not necessarily being the best adults or struggling with adulting. Kind of want to get deeper into that in this episode. So, why do you think you struggle as an adult, or why do
Why is there so much responsibility? That about sums it up.
Okay.
Yeah, everything falls on me, and I've got 3 humans that are growing up in this household that I also am somewhat responsible for. They're getting older, so a little bit of that is lessening, but there's just a lot to remember and take care of and do, and trying to model what it looks like to my kids of like still enjoying life in this season. And I don't think I do that very well sometimes.
how
What about
how
you?
so? Well, I was gonna say how so. Like, what do you think about it?
Well, it's a good question. Like, am I modeling where my kids know that I enjoy life? I hope so. But I know there's times that like I'm short tempered or frustrated, or overwhelmed. Even like my kids' response of like, promise me you won't be mad. You seem kind of overwhelmed right now. And I'm like, I don't want my kids to know that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's life, so I need them to see me managing it well-ish, or at least figuring it out.
Yeah. And I think that I think that does touch on exactly kind of what we discussed about youth kind of understanding that this isn't all easy. My struggles are heavily around executive functioning. So, like you said, all the responsibility, but mine are specifically around like deadlines, bills, things that like pop up that, something with the car, all that. And then they seem like little things, but like you said, since it all ultimately falls on you, for me, with my ADHD and anxiety and all that, like I'm just really bad about that. And as we've discussed, like I've literally like just forgot to cash checks and important
I
things like
know.
that.
Found a few of those.
Right. And really, really important things like that, right? That are for my overall well-being. Where I've become sometimes so overwhelmed that like things like that fall into place, which has led me to say I suck as an adult, or I am a terrible adult.
And I think on paper, I look like a very functional, responsible adult, right? Because I do our taxes on time. I run a business. I work. I manage 3 kids' schedules, and it's exhausting. So I don't.
And
Yeah, maybe it's more the enjoyment level.
well, as you actually as you talked about it, one of the main things I think I'm the worst at is the self-care component of like what it just means to be human. So shifting from the idea of just being a human being to thinking that everything ultimately relies on me, which is I think a concept that I carried around the idea around adulthood. That adulthood means you have everything together. You know what you're supposed to do. You handle your stuff. Problems arise. It doesn't matter. You're going to handle it because
Right, rolls off your back.
That's the concepts we have, or I'll say I had around adulthood that I don't do, that I am not very successful at. And I think that's where a lot of it comes. And one of the interesting components one thing that happened like this year is I really eased off some of my work. I more so like did the work that was coming to me. I didn't do as much
like
I
seeking
did,
out or
yeah,
networking or
exactly. I didn't really like look for as many additional opportunities as I have in the past years. And a lot of
Mhm.
that was me focusing on therapy and my healing this year.
It's huge.
And yeah, no, and I agree. But one of the things that like came up is in therapy was discussing kind of the like concept that I felt like I was somehow failing as an adult
Hmm.
in taking care of myself and doing because I wasn't producing as much. I wasn't working as much. I was working, and that was the thing. I'm still working, but it wasn't working at like you know
Like set schedule,
all
set time, or
well. A lot of my work is all day. Like my mind doesn't stop. So a lot of when I quote unquote work, it's a continuous process throughout the day where I may be doing other things, but will stop and take notes because something will just pop into my mind. So
Mhm.
I've been able to do a lot less of that, and well, I was doing a lot less of that and focusing on the healing, and it started really getting to me where in therapy I kind of brought that up, uh, and I said like, see, I'm good at like things I can study, but I just like suck at life. And my like therapist asked me like, why don't you consider this part of like healing and therapy, which you've been doing well at, part of life? Like, why
right?
isn't this part of the adulting image that you have for yourself? This is, I'm filling in those words, but she asked just her
Yeah.
just words. This was like, why don't you consider this being good at life? Uh, and that's where like it really hits me, and I think it kind of touches on what we're talking about. That my idea of being an adult meant having it all together,
Mhm.
always being prepared, always having a plan, always having, yeah, having it together. I think is the best
Mhm.
way I can put it. In which most of the time I don't feel I have it together, which I think in turn leads me to feeling like I am a failing adult.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think my idea of why I feel like I'm dropping the ball as an adult surrounds more around like emotional regulation. Like I know practically that I'm, almost 42. My brain is mostly developed. I know it can grow and change. But then I'm raising these three people who are 8, 11, and 17, who obviously their brain development is in a lot different place. And I know this, like I have an education in education, and obviously brain science is becoming a huge part of that as we learn more and more. Um, but I get so frustrated with myself when I don't have the capacity, or when I get irritable, or lose my temper. That's where I feel like I'm dropping the ball. Of if I can't even model what it looks like to like have it together, back to that, then like how can I expect my kids to ever be able to do this? But again, this is part of being human. So it's like, can I apologize? Can I own where I've dropped the ball? Can I don't know. I don't know. It's a lot.
Yeah. Uh
But then like ultimately who decides what having it all together looks like? Like who's the determining?
right.
I mean, there's just so
And
many voices, like our own, the culture, whatever little groups we're a part of, or communities that we surround ourselves with.
right.
Yeah.
And exactly kind of I think that even does somewhat mirror what I was saying previously with us having kind of an image of what an adult means and how that it just isn't a human being. That's like a
Mm-hmm.
robot. As far as
Yeah.
like speaking
Yeah.
specifically of me, like the person I imagined what a successful or what a functional adult is a robot.
Yeah.
Um, not at all a human being. Um, like we said, that has to heal,
Mm.
that has to feel, that can become overwhelmed, that can become upset, can become happy. All those different things. But and I wonder really because I have heard that sentiment a lot, and even when we discussed this concept, I wonder how important it is, just going back to that kind of theme of how important it is for your kids to see those moments of being overwhelmed, even though it may be challenging. And I don't know, it's a concept I'm throwing out
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
I wonder how important it
Well, I
would be
think, I
for
mean,
them.
it's probably pretty important, right? It's like social skills. It's watching and learning like how somebody responds to frustrations. But I still think there's opportunity for growth when I don't do it well, and then can kind of, as long as I'm like willing to revisit. And I think my kids are picking up on some of that because they feel very confident in correcting me on my parenting and all the ways I'm falling short. And I'm like, that's got to count for something that you feel safe to say that to me, because never would I have ever told my parents that. And I had good parents that modeled growing, but it was, a different generation. They were, there were just a lot of shifts going on, and those continue. So because my kids feel safe telling me like, I don't like that tone makes me feel like you're mad at me. I've explained to you that I don't like when you speak to me, like, so they're obviously hearing some of the language, and they need to work on their delivery and like reading the room. I don't know if I brought up that story when I brought my 8-year-old to the doctor's office and he's like bouncing off the walls. And I'm like, it was for an ADHD diagnosis, but still, I'm like, get yourself together. I was like, read the room. And he's like, what does that mean? And I'm like, look around at what everybody else is doing and just try to emulate it. Notice everyone else is sitting and like reading a magazine or quietly talking. So anyways, the next time we went somewhere socially and he like kind of managed himself, he's like, Mom, I just read the room. So maybe they're picking up on it. I don't know. But I do feel like, as a parent, I have like such this constant dialogue about what I'm modeling and like what I'm showing is appropriate or okay or healthy. So like, what will that look like when the kids are out of the house?
I think your story really highlighted the aspect I think I hate most about being an adult. Well, I guess it's kind of two things. One is one can be worked on, the other one you can't. One of them is just like the inability to really say like, can someone take over? Like I'm tired. I no longer want to be in charge of my life and
Yeah.
the responsibilities. Can someone take over? Where like
Yeah.
as a kid, you can kind of pass that buck on to a guardian or parent or whomever, hopefully.
Right. Hopefully, yeah. There's some privilege in that, right?
No, definitely. But that like concept of being able to pass it off and not. The other one, I think, and that's where I was even thinking with that, is where your kid was able to ask for help. Where sometimes I feel as an adult, I don't, because I feel that I will be potentially judged by other adults. Like, why don't you know how to do this? Or, come on, man, isn't that adulting? And me not knowing how to do that, I feel like that impedes
Deter
me from
you.
really, and deters me from actually seeking out assistance. And that just actually came up as you were telling your story, as far as something
and
that
that
I think
is
I
true.
struggle
Like,
with.
and I think that's kind of the American culture, right? Is so individualistic and isolating and judgmental. And I learned such a valuable lesson from one of my friends who had 4 kids and would ask me for help all the time and just kind of like unashamedly like put it out there. But I also knew my boundaries of like when it was helpful and when it wasn't. And it was like this learning lesson of like, I love that she feels so comfortable asking, even if I have to say no. And I think the reason she felt so comfortable asking is because she knew I would say no if I couldn't do it. So she never felt like she was going to be putting me out because she knew I had boundaries that like, no, that time doesn't work, but I could, do this time. Or sometimes even it was just no, no other options. But yeah, we do that so much in the American culture of people, and people like to help. Think about how much you like helping people. Think about how much, so to like be given an opportunity to like step in and help where I can, if I don't know. I try to watch, like I'm an observer. So I do try to see maybe where friends or people around me like need help or support in ways that they might not be asking. But I probably don't model that super well either.
I think lighted another part, at least that I struggle with, is the concepts around boundaries.
Mhm.
And that's another reason why I kind of eased up on work this past year a little bit. I'm starting to get back into it more now, but why I eased up was sometimes I don't set enough boundaries for myself. And in the
Mhm.
sense that that's what I like I like people to be well. So
Yeah.
I am willing to help people. But to say like going to the concept of really liking to help people, what I would do to myself is that would be my only role. And that would overwhelm me, in which at that point then I just isolate myself and block myself.
Yeah.
Uh
So there, like, you didn't have very much like reciprocity in those relationships, like, or commitments or whatever. It was,
I don't know if I ever really sought it though. And I
yeah.
think this kind of goes into our whole it was mentioned kind of in the last episode, but a lot of my identity and concept around myself was of servitude. That's what
Mhm.
I thought I was good at. That's what I thought I was on earth for concept.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know if I really ever sought that. And I think that not setting those boundaries for myself potentially led me to believe I wasn't ever receiving anything in return because I wasn't ever asking for anything in
Right.
return. Um, so kind of what I was allowing to actually play out and not recognizing. One of the big things I think I've learned is also too, just with time, is uh how I show love isn't necessarily how everyone shows love. So the
Right.
concept of like acts of service and things like that may not be how other people come through for me.
Mhm.
But in the past, being very poor at recognizing those other actions, if they weren't, kind of what I was used to or how I showed love.
Yeah. Where's the handbook on all this? And there's so many different ones. Like kind of we talked about with parenting, like all the books on it, right?
Hmm.
But then it's like choice paralysis when there are so many different options of, yeah, like what do we do? Who should we learn from? What, I don't know. But at the end of the
And
day, ask for help.
right, and this is kind of hopefully a part of the theme of this podcast or idea, because like you said, there's so many actual books like on parenting. There's so many how to be a successful adult, 8 habits of whatever. So many podcasts, so many different videos, so many just do this, and we'll discuss about like neurodivergence and things like that. But I'll see so many things like, oh, get yourself organized with an ADHD
And
brain,
three
and
easy
like,
steps.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh, and those are the things where it's just like so many different things don't work for me that it is challenging seeing these things being sold as the solution. Because when
Yeah.
they don't sit as a solution for me, it's just another level of failure that I feel. And that's one of the things I think we're hoping to connect with people in this podcast, is that we're not trying to be on here
Yeah.
showing up. And that's why I thought it was good for us to clarify what we mean exactly by
Yeah. So
the
kind of
concept.
back to like what we had spoken to of like we have no solutions. We have our stories and our struggles. And I mean, you can put suggestions for solutions and maybe we'll read them. I don't
Yeah.
know.
But yeah, just this idea. But I think hopefully too we can normalize for people as well is the fact that a lot of adults don't have it as put together as is put out in
Presented.
social is
Yeah.
presented, especially when we talk about things like social media. Um, going through. I know you're a bit more honest on your social media. I know I'm a bit more honest than typical on my social media, but just like many people's lives look just so great on social
Hmm.
media, and understanding this concept that there's this whole other level that a lot of people are going at and trying to dispel that even as we put this on social media and the world to see that, because we can joke around that we're not successful adults and things like that, but there are components about us that are clearly successful if we're about to
Right.
do, if we're able to do the things we're able to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
But going into that concept of what we feel about ourselves, how we kind of go through the day, what we think. Because I do, in all honesty, a lot of my not a lot of my day anymore. A lot of my life has been. But the concept that I suck at life. That just
Hmm.
somehow, and a lot of the things was always what I would say was, I'm really good at anything I can study. Give me
Yeah.
anything I can like study.
Or
I can
figure
do,
out or.
yeah, figure out. I can do really well. I just can't do the life things that I can't observe. So like, and this will be a whole nother episode, but like maintaining relationships, that kind of goes into
Mhm.
the whole boundaries thing, as to why I've struggled so much with uh potentially relationships, is because I bottle so much inside, and then when I really need something and it doesn't get fulfilled, I feel like, okay, people aren't there for me and things like that.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and that'll be definitely like a deeper story, but yeah, coming to this idea that a lot of people don't. I I also want to touch into the concept, because another thing we kind of wanted to discuss was how my concept of adulting has changed from when I was a kid.
Mm.
And one of those is, I mean, it is repeating this, that the idea that I, as an adult, need to have it all put together and have everything
Mhm.
resolved. But I guess that morphs into just also life. But this idea that life isn't a set plan for anybody. That there is no, like, do this and this will make
Mhm.
your life successful, because successful can be many different things. For me, success
Mhm.
would be happiness. That is
Mhm.
what I kind of equate with
But then how do you
success.
define happiness? Like, is that like fulfillment, contentment?
Right.
That's also kind of subjective. Semantics.
No, no, but it is exactly that. It's suggest there is no do this, do that, do these three steps, and you will find success. Because what that individual is ultimately communicating is the three steps that led to what success meant for them.
Mhm.
I took these three steps, I did these 8 steps, whatever, and this led to success for me in my eyes. But
Right.
understanding that that's oftentimes not the type of success I'm chasing.
Yeah.
I've really, I mean, I have a really complicated relationship with money. In a sense, I really don't like it. Uh,
Mhm.
as far as a lot of the things that I know that I can study and observe and take notes from others, do carry around the idea of success within American culture of capitalism,
Mhm.
where a lot of it
Mhm.
is what you have, what you own, what your career looks like, how do others look at you,
Mhm.
all of that, which honestly just doesn't matter to me
Mhm.
anymore. So really re-understanding what I look like as an adult. What is that meaning? What does that mean for me? And now
Mhm.
understanding that that is very different for me and very unique to every individual. That there
And
is
it might
no
even change for you, right? Like what I defined as success 5 years ago is looking way different right now, or I don't know. Yeah, it's just
right.
kind of this moving target. I watched this TED talk on like happiness, but it was like the American culture is so good about like setting these standards and like benchmarks, but then as soon as you meet it, you've got to get more and better. So there's like this constant like pursuit of like contentment as this illusion, because it's like it'll be okay once you get there. Oh, but you got there and then there's still further to go. And like again, like how exhausting. It's just exhausting. And not that I just want to like survive. I do really want to live a life that somebody would like perceive as like thriving. Like, but how do I define it? I want to be content. I would like my kids to be happy, healthy, and honorable people. like, I, I mean, I like nice stuff. I very much. I mean, I realize I come from a place of privilege, and I realize even just us being able to have this opportunity to sit and talk is privileged, and so I get that. But I also like, I like nice things. I like good food. I like traveling. um I don't know. It's complicated. Yeah, back to that. That's another one too, that complicated dynamic of finances. So
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one,
mhm.
especially because I've definitely hit a spectrum of different financial. state. So, with all that said, what would be some of the ways, or what would be one of the biggest ways you think your idea of being adult has changed since like you were younger? What does that
I
mean to
mean,
you now?
well, I think I'm still in the process of unpacking, right? Because I'm like
Yeah.
walking through the season. I watched my parents and thinking they had it all together, and not to say even with that, like, I mean, my parents were mostly pretty. My dad could be a little bit explosive in his responses. My mom could be a little short tempered in her responses, but now as a mom, I totally get that. I'm like, yeah, that was probably driving her nuts. Like, um, so I think I'm still trying to like unpack and figure out like, or letting go of the idea of like, I don't have to have it all together. I don't have to have all the answers. Um, I'm a planner. I'm a planner by nature. So I mean, part of that's kind of the adult child of an alcoholic, like just the control piece. Like I really like things to be ordered and in control, but you'll notice that my background is blurred right now. It's because I've got like a bin of puppy stuff in a box. But even that like stresses me out. So I don't know. I don't know what the biggest shift has been because I think I'm maybe walking through it right now. What about you?
I think similar. However, most of all, I honestly think I'm transitioning into a point in my life where living has become the most important part now in my life.
Now,
Where
how do
this
we
concept,
define living?
well, for me, it's very much not just surviving, because
Uh-huh,
that's what I've
uh-huh.
done, is survive, is get through,
Yeah.
is just get through, is the way I would say.
Mm-hmm.
But where I'm trying to transition much more now in my life is where I can honestly just sit on the couch and not do anything and feel okay with that,
Mm-hmm.
and feel okay with where my life is, and have moments like that that I honestly feel were impossible for me before. And I say impossible because there's just a lot of work I ultimately still had to do. Not
Mm-hmm.
that I wasn't capable of it, but really now being able to live, yeah, and take those moments for myself, appreciate the things I actually do well,
Mm-hmm.
um, appreciate the fact that I am able to overcome a lot of the challenges that do come my way,
Mm-hmm.
um, and really trying to take that time for myself. And I think how that is how adulting has changed for me. That is what adulting is becoming for me of. Um, and it's something that I think it's just a transition between what I thought there had to be a difference between being a kid and an adult.
Mm-hmm.
There is, as far as, because there's just a lot of different
Increased
responsibilities,
responsibility.
right, as we just discussed. But for me, what I'm really trying to touch in on for myself is it doesn't mean we have to stop living.
Right.
And I think as kids, we don't we don't understand the rest of the world. We don't Our brains aren't fully developed enough to
Mm-hmm.
potentially understand the responsibilities that exist with living. But that doesn't necessarily all need to disappear just because we get older.
Yeah.
And I think as I get older and like see my parents who are older now, and my mom just being more at peace with things, my dad being more at peace with things. Um, just that idea that, yeah, it doesn't have to, just because we become an adult doesn't mean we have to stop living, or
Right.
doesn't mean we have to stop enjoying life. And I think that's been the big shift for me, because I didn't see adulting as something enjoyable. I thought it was something
Yeah.
of just responsibility. And I think that is
Yeah.
starting to shift in me.
Yeah, I like that. I know, and I've kind of noticed that shift too, but it's been with a change in relationship dynamics, which we'll unpack as time goes on as well. And I mean, at the end of the day, like I am a fun person. Like I enjoy life. I have a pretty positive outlook on things. I have good people that surround me. And I just don't feel like my kids really got to see that side of me because I was so bogged down in the responsibility, particularly with a partner that wasn't really partnering. And that felt exhausting. So even in these last 3.5 months of my kids getting to experience more of like who I am, like quick to laugh and quick to make fun of myself and, make a fool out of myself and dance and sing and, just things like pieces of me that I had really just let go because I was so exhausted. So, and it makes me sad that my kids didn't get to have that, but also excited that they get to see parts of it now.
It's interesting because as I'm hearing that, it sounds like it's these additional titles that we put on ourselves that seem to be the barriers for us enjoying life. Because like you
Mhm.
said, like adding on adulting, and we'll have a longer um episode on potentially parenting, but like the concept of, yeah, what you thought you had to be when you put the parenting hat on and what
Mhm.
that meant versus now understanding that you being you is actually being a stronger parent now, but
Mhm.
you didn't allow yourself to be you because you thought you had to put on this
Yeah.
other parent image. And I think
Mhm.
that mirrors very much this concept that we've been discussing as far as adulting, as far as, oh, I have to put this adult image. I have to, you know,
Yeah. I mean,
be
at the
this
end of the
certain
day, there
person.
are responsibilities, right? There are things that we have to do, but how can we like integrate them in a way that it's not like the entirety of our existence? I mean, when I get to like a stressed out place, I just go to like fix, 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 go, 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 do, 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 and that's not a healthy place for me to be. So recognizing, okay, like at the end of the day, like what can I let go of? Like what's going to make my life kind of be able to create a little bit more capacity um, by, yeah, things don't have to be done perfectly and they don't have to be done, to the best of my ability. That's been hard this year as this is my first year in this new role. I'm back to teaching, but in an online platform. Um, and I don't feel like I'm doing it my best. I know that I'm doing it well. Like I'm not, and I'm showing up for my kids and my kids are growing. And I just know how much better I could be doing it if I, put in more time and energy. But then that's like time and energy that's taken away from my kids that I only have half the time right now. And time and energy, so it's just like this balance of, and the American culture too, I think has put so much of our, uh, like existence around or like what's the word I'm looking for of like your work is so important.
Capitalism.
Like yeah, well,
Yeah.
capital, yeah, right. But like that, this is our biggest identity is like how well do we work? How much do we work? How and I mean in education, this is like a thankless, exhausting position to be too because there's so much that could be done all the time. So to just figure out what can be let go of, um, yeah, what prioritizing, so we don't lose our house. We don't get, my kids still have water and electricity. So, yeah, so many things.
I one of the things I've tried to remind myself now is that I've always been able to figure it out
Mm-hmm.
before. So I've really tried to reinforce that confidence in myself in the sense that there really isn't any reason that I wouldn't be able to figure things out now, in which like I have been able in the
Mm-hmm.
past. So I need to
Mm-hmm.
have that confidence in myself to keep going and not get overwhelmed by that stuff. It's
Yeah.
still a process.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of, and a lot of the things I'm saying are not things I've lived with my whole life. There are a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
I am actually sharing on this podcast are specific from this last year of learning through therapy, because it was a lot of
Yeah.
work, but it was a lot of this discovery of um learning to give myself time. That my whole
Mm-hmm.
identity wasn't around work. And I know our next episode will be about work and careers and how that ultimately plays into everything. Um, but going into this idea of shifting into what life means for me and being able to appreciate the moments and giving myself the time and the confidence to understand that what problems do arise, as I have been able to deal with the ones in my past, I will most likely be able to deal with the ones in my future. And I need to have that confidence of myself, or else I'm just constantly going to stress myself out, because it's not like
Yeah.
life stops happening. You're always going to have problems if you're living.
Yeah.
Just kind
Super
of.
helpful and encouraging, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, we're kind of sold this lie that maybe they don't happen, or, if things are going poorly, then it's something we could do to like fix it. Or if things are going well, it's because of things we've done right. It's messy.
Right.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. I think too.
But again,
and
we have no solutions. We'd
yeah.
like to reiterate.
That'll be a good, and we can probably touch on it when we get into like religion, but like an idea of karma and being rewarded for good deeds and things like that. I think a lot of I do think religion and faith and spirituality play a component in that, but that'll be definitely a much longer conversation.
Yeah.
That might be our first hour special.
Yeah.
So that's been our episode on adulting for the most part. We're going to be discussing more.
Best wishes out there.
We'll be discussing more on career next, but a lot of these episodes are really so that hopefully people can relate,
Connect.
connect. One of my big goals for this channel was the idea that there needs to be images of people and adults that don't have it all necessarily figured out in the world. And that message being that it's also okay that that's the case. So hopefully if you heard this episode and you listened all the way through with us, we appreciate you. And hopefully you as well are appreciative of yourself during these times. Life is tough, adulting's tough. So hopefully you allow yourself some grace sometimes.
Yeah. And figure out what living well looks like for you, right?
Because we're still figuring it out. It's great to say, but admittedly, we're still figuring it out as well. So thank you all for your time. Like and subscribe, comment, do all those great things. If we are releasing this episode, we have another episode filmed and ready to edit and go. So hope to see you all soon again. Thank you all. Wishing you peace, love, and power. And hope to see you again.
Bye.